All right, what's up, everybody? So today we want to take a look at a couple concepts related to experimental design. We're going to talk about blinding an experiment, single versus double blind. We want to look at some confounding variables. What's that? And then we'll also look at how we can use blocking, which we'll talk about in another video, but we'll look at the connection between blocking and confounding variables. So let's do it. Here we go. So blinding. First off, when we say blinded in an experiment, blinded refers to not knowing how treatments are assigned. All right, so if you're part of an experiment and you don't know if you got the placebo or the actual experimental medication, you have been blinded. So that's the first thing we need to know. And so there are two types of blinded experiments. We could have a single blind experiment, we could have a double blind experiment, right? Sometimes. So I give this example of, right, you might be given a placebo or an actual medication, right? So you don't know which one you got. But if I'm like testing, does listening to music help me study, right? Like there's no way I'm going to be able to be blinded, right? I'm going to know if I'm in the listen to music group, right? So it depends on the situation. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent. So here we go. So when we think about an experiment, there are two groups of people that can influence the results of that experiment. So we've got the people who can influence the results, influence kind of what's going to happen. And that's most typically the subjects, the participants, the volunteers, the people in the study, or maybe the things or animals in the study. Right? But it could also be kind of some other people who are part of the process. You can see their treatment administrators, technicians, whatever. Then the other group of people who can influence the outcome of an experiment are the people who evaluate the results. Or in other words, the people who actually record the data. The people who are measuring the response variable, whatever that is for a given context. And so in an experiment, we can sometimes make one of these groups unaware how treatments were assigned, sometimes make both of these groups unaware how treatments are assigned. If one of these groups of people, doesn't matter which one, but if one of these groups of people, I mean, I don't know why I'm highlighting this, like you pretty much just read it, right? If one of these groups of people is unaware how treatments are assigned, we call that a single blind experiment. And I'll unnecessarily highlight this. If both of these groups of people are unaware how treatments are assigned, we call that a double blind experiment. And the best experiments are double blind if it's possible to double blind them, right? That music example I made up, there's no way I can blind the people, make them unaware of if they're listening to music or not. So on the AP exam, we might be given a situation and asked, is this a single, double, or neither, right? Single blind, double blind, or neither. Or we might have a free response where we're asked, can this experiment be double blind, and explain how, or double blinded and explain how. Now let's think about why blinding is important. So let's use an example here of the COVID vaccine. Seems like a good one, given everything that's going on. So let's say, right, we're hearing all this, or we were at least hearing all this stuff about these phase 3 clinical trials and all that. So let's say we have 30,000 volunteers. And so I'm going to randomly assign, right? This would always be random assignment right here. And we would have to explain how to randomly assign. Maybe not realistic, but I could take all 30,000 volunteers, write their names on pieces of paper, put those pieces of paper in a hat, shuffle them all, mix them up. That's the randomization. Randomly select 15,000 pieces of paper out of the hat without replacement. And maybe those 15,000 people get the COVID vaccine. And then I have 15,000 more pieces of paper in my hat, and those 15,000 people whose names are left in the hat, they get some placebo. Now, right off the bat, I want to blind these people. I don't want people to know if they got the vaccine or not. So I'm going to use, right, a placebo. A placebo is a tool for blinding. A placebo is just, right, a fake treatment. So one thing, a lot of times students want to say a placebo is used for control. And I get that because the placebo, right, like the group that receives the placebo is the control group. But really, a placebo, which is just a fake treatment of some kind. So in this case, I'm going to have some people are going to get a shot on the arm that's the actual COVID vaccine. Some people are going to get a shot on the arm that's like fake. I don't know, whatever's safe to inject into a human that does nothing. Or if I were testing like a pill, right? Some people are going to get the actual medication in pill form. Some people are going to get like a sugar pill that just looks exactly the same, right? So that placebo is just a fake treatment. It looks exactly the same as the actual treatment. And we want to use that so that people don't know, right? If they were in the vaccine group or the not vaccine group. And if I just didn't give them any vaccine, like they'd notice, and then they would not be blinded. So we use this placebo, right? Everyone just got a shot in the arm. They don't know if there was the actual vaccine or not. Now, why do we care about that, right? Why do we want to blind? Why do we want to make sure our volunteers are unaware how the treatments were assigned? Well, our goal was to see if this vaccine actually, maybe we're trying to look at the severity of the COVID symptoms. I want all of these people to really ideally behave in the same exact way. So if these people, let's say these people know they got the COVID vaccine, well, then maybe they're going to put themselves in higher risk situations. Maybe they're going to hang out with their friends and family because they feel like they're safe or something. Maybe they're not going to be as responsible about their social distancing or mask, right? Or mask. I mean, hopefully not, right? Because we got to care about each other too, not just ourselves, but whatever. Right? But maybe their behavior is going to be impacted by the fact that they know they have the vaccine, and maybe they're going to engage in more risky behavior. Or conversely, if these people were aware that they didn't get the vaccine, maybe then they're going to be, I suppose they should just be the same level of cautious they were before, right? But maybe in some way they're going to modify their behavior. We don't want that. We don't want people to change their behavior based on, right, knowing which treatment group they were in. So instead, we want to make sure that these people are blinded. We want to make sure they're unaware which treatment group they're in so that they just continue to go about their daily lives. Everyone's all doing the same thing. They're all wearing their masks, social distancing, doing all the right stuff. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, right? So that's the one group, the people who could influence the results here or the outcome, kind of the people we're experimenting on. But the other people we want to think about are at the end, maybe if someone gets sick, then we look at the severity of their symptoms, right? We want to hire some independent doctor. Sorry, my handwriting's horrible, but you hear me, right? We want to hire some independent doctor maybe, or just at least have some doctor who doesn't know what the person received, the vaccine or the placebo, kind of maybe rate their severity. So for sake of keeping it simple, we'll just say we're going to rate their severity on a scale of 1 to 5. So I don't want this person to know which treatment each person received, right? So when I walk in, I'm like, hey, I'm sick, doc. Can you rate me? What's my severity? Whatever he says, right? Like, I don't want him to know that I got the vaccine, because then maybe that doctor is more inclined to say my symptoms are less severe, trying to produce evidence that this vaccine works, right? We don't want any bias introduced. Maybe I'm just making this up, right? I'm not trying to say anything bad about any of these companies. And I think we can trust that our doctors and our statisticians, our biostatisticians, are going to do things ethically. But in this made up example, let's say we've got some doctor who works for Pfizer, right? They want to be able to say their vaccine works, right? They've been working really hard on this. So maybe this Pfizer doctor is trying to decide, I can't decide if your rating's a 3 or a 4 for your severity. Well, if this doctor knows you got the vaccine, maybe he's going to be more inclined, or she's going to be more inclined to round down and give you the 3. Try to show lower severity ratings with the vaccine. Or conversely, maybe if this doctor knows that the patient got the placebo and didn't actually get the vaccine, maybe then this doctor, maybe he or she is going to be more inclined to round up. And so, right, trying to kind of introduce bias in terms of how they rate, right, trying to make it seem like, or trying to make it look like the vaccine, or trying to make the data show that the vaccine is effective. Now, right, we don't have to worry about those things because we're going to conduct this in a double-blind manner. I don't know if I just made up that wording, right? We're going to make sure that this doctor has no idea how treatments were assigned, so none of those biases can even come into play. So we always, best case scenario, double-blind experiment, so we can take out the possibility for bias from the person who's actually recording the data, or take out the possibility that maybe the volunteers in our experiment modify their behavior or something and introduce bias in some way there. Or someone in class brought up an example from Grey's Anatomy. I don't watch it, but apparently there was a situation where people were getting like an experimental cancer medication or something. And one of the doctor's friends was sick, and the doctor found out that her friend had gotten the placebo, which she knew wasn't going to help. So then she switched her to the treatment group, and then it ruined the entire experiment, right? We want to make sure that doctor's blinded so things like that cannot happen. I don't know. Watch Grey's Anatomy or something. So that's the deal with blinding. All right. The next thing we want to look at, oh wait, here's some pictures. Blinding. I thought these were cool. Right, so single blind, the doctor does know who got the placebo and the drug, but the people don't. It could go in the other direction as well, right? These could both be light bulbs. That's pretty much the worst light bulb ever. That one's a little better. And this one could be a question mark. But the thing is, one of these two sets of people is going to be unaware how treatments are assigned. Most likely, it's going to occur as shown in this diagram. Or a double-blind experiment, right? Everybody's got a question mark. This doctor doesn't know who got what. The people don't know who got what. We can see here, right? We've got some fake sugar pills that look like they could be a medicine. That's our placebo. So now, the next thing we want to look at, confounding variables. So a confounding variable. The whole point of an experiment is to try to establish some cause and effect relationship, to try to see, does some independent variable lead to some response, some change in some dependent variable? Is it some IV causing some change in some DV? And so a confounding variable we're seeing here is something that's getting in the way. It's confusing me. That's the root word there. It's limiting or blocking my ability to show the connection between this independent and dependent variable. So textbook definition of a confounding variable would say the levels of one factor are associated with the levels of another factor. And factor is just a variable. Right now, this textbook definition probably doesn't mean much to us. I think we're better off looking at a example. Before we do that, another thing, so a confounding variable oftentimes is something that I should have controlled, right? So it's something that I should have known could be a potential issue in allowing me to establish a relationship between the IV, the explanatory, and the response, the DV. So here's the best way, right? Let's take a look at an example of like the worst experiment ever designed. So let's say we want to test the effectiveness of some fertilizer. I want to see if it helps tomatoes grow better, more, I don't know, tastier. So we get 50 tomato plants. I randomly assign treatments, although this doesn't seem pretty random. So this already seems like a horrible design. And right, so immediately, right, like you're looking at this, like this is the dumbest experiment ever. So let's say we have 25 tomato plants that are all in the closet, and all 25 of those tomato plants don't get any fertilizer. And then we have 25 other tomato plants that are in my window over here in the classroom, and those 25 do get the fertilizer. Now, right, we all realize this is the worst. This is really dumb, right? We should not have done that. We should have controlled the amount of sunlight. Obviously, we shouldn't put some in the closet and some in the window, but we're going to use this ridiculous example to help us understand what a confounding variable is. So let's say after whatever X amount of time, these 25 tomato plants in the window grow more, right? They produce bigger, juicier, tastier tomatoes. These do not grow as much. Now, the problem is I cannot determine, was it the fertilizer or was it the amount of sunlight that led to more growth, right? If these plants grew more, I don't know why that happened. Was it because of the explanatory variable that we're trying to manipulate, the IV? Did that lead to more growth? Or now I'm confused. I don't know. Did the fertilizer actually lead to more growth? Or was it the amount of sunlight, this confounding variable? Is that what led to this change, this increased or enhanced growth? We can show that with a diagram, right? So kind of recap here. So our goal is to see how our explanatory variable, right, which is our fertilizer use, right? We want to see how does this cause better growth of tomatoes or something like that, right? That's the goal, to show that the fertilizer maybe leads to better tomatoes, or it could be worse, right? Maybe my fertilizer is like poison or something. So we want to see how this fertilizer connects to this response variable. And these are just some statistical vocab, but this is the same thing as the IV and the DV. The problem is I have this confounding variable here which is the amount of sun, and I cannot separate the effects of these two. I am not sure which one of these two variables, the black or the red, is leading to the better, juicier, more delicious, bigger tomatoes, right? I cannot separate the effects of one variable, fertilizer, with another. Or what was the wording we used up here? The levels of one variable, the amounts of fertilizer or something, are overlapping with some other factor, the amount of sunlight. And so this is a visual representation of what a confounding is doing, right? These two variables are overlapping and I cannot pull them apart. I'm confused. I don't know which one is actually leading to better, juicier tomatoes. Another quick example I think of, right? So like in my own personal life, so I used to get a lot of headaches, a lot of migraines-ish, not as bad as, well, who cares, right? I got some headaches. And so my wife looked up, she was like, hey, I think taking fish oil is going to lead to a reduction in the number of migraines you have per month, maybe, right? But my anecdotal evidence, me just taking fish oil, and then I think I get less headaches, right? I can't say that's not an experiment, right? And part of the problem is, well, at the same time as I started taking fish oil, I went to the store and I just bought a bunch of vitamins, right? So I bought some men's 1 a day. And right, because I'm getting old, so I got to start taking vitamins and stuff. And I got some aloe because that said it was good for my general health, right? Whatever. And so I don't actually know if it's the fish oil that reduced the number of migraines I was getting a month. Maybe it's these other vitamins that I'm taking, right? I cannot separate the effects of these, but I should have controlled that. Like, that was dumb. If I really wanted to know if the fish oil was going to help me, I should not have started taking a bunch of other vitamins at the same time. But again, in this made up, well, not really made up, this is my real life. But in this example, again, I have a confounding variable. I'm confused. What's leading to less migraines? Is it the fish oil or is it all the other stuff? I suppose next month I could stop taking all the other stuff and see if it's really the fish oil, but it doesn't feel like it's worth the risk. So that's the deal with a confounding variable, right? I like personally to think about that confuses me kind of thing. So blocking. Now, quickly, we're going to talk about blocking in class heavily over the next couple days. So we'll kind of isolate this out as its own topic. But blocking is the same thing as stratifying, right? So if you've learned about sampling, right, it's the same idea. That's like not even letters, right? But it's the same kind of thing as stratifying. I will say, though, you can never say you stratify an experiment. You cannot say you block a survey. Same conceptual idea, just incorrect vocab. So we block experiments, we stratify samples. So we can use blocking to eliminate a confounding variable. So let's go back to the terrible tomato experiment. So in this situation, right, blocking is before I randomly assign tomatoes to get the fertilizer or not. Blocking is first I create these groups. So first I block my tomato plants. Maybe now I just put 20 tomato plants in the closet and 20 plants in the window, right? So I start by creating those two separate groups. I'm pointing to my windows in my closet. You don't know that. Now I just seem like a weirdo. So that's the first step, right? And that's a quick picture of what the idea of blocking is. That's it. You just create these two separate groups initially, or more than two groups. Now from there, just for the closet group, maybe I randomly assign, right, names in a hat or something like that, random number generator, whatever. I randomly assign 10 of the closet plants to get the fertilizer and 10 of the closet plants to just get watered regularly. I probably don't have to use a placebo. I probably don't have to trick the tomato plants. They probably can't tell if they're getting fertilizer. I don't know. Probably don't need a fake fertilizer. And then similarly, I put 20 plants in the window, and from those 20, I randomly assign 10 to get the fertilizer in the window and 10 to just get regular watering. And so now I've eliminated that original confounding variable of amount of sunlight has been eliminated. Now I know, right, if the fertilizer is actually causing or leading to more delicious, bigger tomatoes, because now I can compare the fertilizer group to the no fertilizer group specific to all the plants that are in the closet. And so if these produce more tomatoes, bigger, juicier tomatoes, better tomatoes in the closet, and the fertilizer produces better, juicier, more delicious tomatoes in the window, I'm pretty convinced the fertilizer was effective because in both conditions, right, both environments, the fertilizer seemed to produce better tomato growth. I can also then, I mean, it's kind of obvious in this situation. So not only can I compare within the blocks to look to really isolate the effectiveness of the fertilizer, but I can compare across blocks and see, hey, what was, we know fertilizer worked. Now what was even, what was beyond that? What was better, fertilizer in the sun or fertilizer in the closet? I mean, we probably know the answer to that. It's, again, right? I intentionally chose this ridiculous example. So that's the idea of how we can use blocking. By creating this group, we can eliminate that potentially confounding variable. And so that's one version of what I mean by saying we should have controlled for that in the first place. And this right here, this is just the same kind of idea, right? Oh, before I was thinking I did yoga too, right? But this is bad, right? So pretend that's another thing that happened. I did start doing yoga. I was like, man, I'm old. I should be healthy. I need to do yoga and take vitamins, right? So we'll just call this other vitamins. But if instead, I'm not even gonna say anything. I'm just gonna let you soak that in. See if you can make some sense of that. I don't actually have to pause, right? You have like a pause button. But so here, right, I can look at an other vitamin group and people who only take fish oil, right? This is only fish oil. Or I'm sorry, no other vitamins. Some get the fish oil, some get the placebo. And again, right, I can now eliminate this other vitamins possibility because I can see like, hey, here did the fish oil people get fewer migraines? Here did the fish oil people get fewer migraines? I feel like I didn't need 2 examples. I just made the video longer for no reason. Anyways, the best experiments, we always want random assignment of treatments. We always want to be able to compare. They should be double blind. We should use placebo controlled, and they might be blocked. I ran out of fingers. The blocking is not a requirement, right? Not all experiments lend themselves to that. And that's it. I clicked undo, but it was supposed to say the end. Have a glorious, glorious afternoon.